everyone, this is Garden Variety Knits. If you've been here before, it is so nice to have you back, and if you're new, then my name is Kelsey. I am a New Zealander, but I live in Switzerland at the moment, and I've been knitting seriously for like 18 months. But yeah, this is just going to be, pretty classic knitting YouTube channel episode. I'll go through the things that I've just finished recently, the things that I am currently working on, and just any plans or inspiration that I've found. It's been a little while since I recorded, so it's probably going to be a slightly long one. My voice is not in the best condition, so I might take it slow, and please forgive me if I sound a bit scratchy. A little bit more about me. As well as knitting, I enjoy some outdoor activities, like I quite like camping and hiking and rock climbing, although more indoor than outdoor for rock climbing. And I also enjoy just playing some video games, reading books, listening to podcasts, and yeah, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I studied maths and computer science, and some of the things that I enjoy in terms of podcasts lean a little bit more in that direction, I guess. Sometimes I recommend content, and I guess that's the only time this will come up in the context of a knitting video. But yeah, that's me, and let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I finished since last recording is what I'm wearing. And this is called, just show it off. And I say finished, it's not really true. I knit it a while ago, like a year ago. But I did some recent modifications to I added these straps instead of, it was kind of just like a high neck tank. And then what I actually finished since last recording is I added some duplicate stitching to kind of the gappy bits at the top front half. And that was just to make it a bit more of an opaque fabric. So I've got some close-up footage that I'll just insert rather than trying to show it to you on my body. But basically the stitch pattern has some kind of bits where the stitches end up quite stretched out, and so I was duplicate stitching to just add a bit more fabric there. And I thought of it as a whip again while I was doing that work on it, which means I get to claim it again as a finished object. And so pattern and yarn, this is called the Romanesco jumper, and it's by Ranti Ehinmola, or Ranti Studio on Instagram, and it's meant to be a long sleeve jumper, and it looks really cool actually. It has this stitch pattern, but then it kind of gets smaller and smaller up towards the neck, and has like the same like spiky sleeves, but I just wasn't sure that I would wear a jumper like that, and so I modified it to a tank, which one of the testers had done, and then I modified it further to be like a strapped tank top. And the yarn is the fibre company Luma, which is, so it's a DK yarn, and that's 50% merino, 25% cotton, 15% linen, or kind of, it says cellulose, so I guess it's been turned into like a rayon, and 10% silk, which means that it's only 50% kind of wool content, and then the other 50% is like plant silk. So in my mind, I thought maybe it would work better for a summer type tank, but because it's DK weight, and also now with the duplicate stitching I've added, it's quite thick, so I'm quite glad to have it like so breezy, I guess, like it's quite a small amount of contact with my skin. So I think it'll work for most summer weather, at least in Switzerland. It won't be too hot, but I wouldn't wear it if it was going to be an absolute scorcher of a day. Now that I've put in this final duplicate stitching, which was honestly quite a lot of time, I can wear it all summer feeling happy. And yeah, I also gave it another wash after doing all of that, so it just feels fresh and ready. That's all I have to say about this, really. And so we can move on to the next one. Okay, so this one also came up last video, and it is exciting that it's done. I would say it is mixed results, but I am pretty happy with it overall. So this is my little like scoop neck tank top, crop top. with a split front detail here. And oof, so I can't remember, this yarn is one I've mentioned a few times, but I never really know, like I don't know its name. It's the sock yarn that my local yarn store sells, and it is 60% wool and the other 40% is a blend of silk and nettle, which I think is a nylon alternative for socks. And as far as I can tell, maybe it's like it's got quite a lot, I think it's actually 4 plies. It's not super soft. It got softer with blocking, but it's still a bit hard wearing. It's not scratchy, but maybe a bit rough, I guess is the right word. It's definitely not very like soft and squishy is the thing. It kind of, I think it's quite a dense strand. And its density also meant that I had to knit it on 2mm needles to get a fabric that I was happy with. And even then, I think it's a little bit more see-through than I want. I think that might also partly be because it's light, like such a light color. Yeah, so this was quite a lot of knitting, even though it's not a big garment. Because yeah, it's ribbed, so the number of stitches in the circumference is probably quite a lot bigger because it's so stretchy. I haven't measured the row gauge, but I'm sure it's a lot. I'm sure it's over 40 rows per 10 centimeters. But yeah, okay, I'll talk quickly first about all the things I like about it, and then we can go through the nitpicking. I also took some footage of me trying it on, so we can insert that and you can see kind of the result. So one of the things I did that I really like is that for the edge stitches, the selvage, I chose to do a 3-stitch double knit edge, which just meant in one direction I would knit, slip, knit, and then in the other direction I would slip, knit, slip. So really easy to do as you're going, but just created a much neater and tidier edge without having to then go through and apply a double knitted edge afterwards, which some patterns do, like the square neck camisole by Helene Beba, which it's a really nice pattern, and I think I might make it again this summer. But yeah, with this one I was just doing it as I went. I also added bust shaping, and for that I chose to do it by with short row bust shaping. So when you add short rows, there's 2 ways to do it. One, you could start by decreasing the length of your short rows and then increase the length of your short rows again as you're resolving the first lot, and that ends up with a kind of a shape of fabric, maybe like this, or I'll put in the diagram, and that kind of symmetric extra bit of fabric on the front. But you could also just do short rows of decreasing length and then just one round where you resolve them all. And that kind of adds like a trapezoid of fabric into the bust area. And I chose to do that, but I also chose to do kind of a less aggressive diagonal and then do 2 lots of those short rows. I think I might have done slightly more than I needed, but it is pretty good, and I think actually the back and the front sit at pretty much an even place on my body, so I'm pretty happy with those short rows. Going back to the edging, so I was doing that selvage all the way down the increases, but then when I cast on across the front and across the armhole, I actually just left those 3 selvage stitches on hold, and then I did kind of apply double knitting. I picked up 2 and 3 columns or something. I picked up a stitch and then I kind of applied double knitting across, so I worked that selvage across, knitting together with the picked up stitches. I'll link a tutorial below for applied double knitting. It comes up in a few patterns. But yeah, that was just an easy way to kind of continue that edging down, and also it, I think, gave this cast on bit a little bit more structure. And then also another detail that I liked is that when I went to split my front, I worked 3 rows of double knitting. I guess it was actually 6. I found the center 6 or 7 stitches and double knit those instead of doing them as normal rib for those rows, and then when I split, I continued that whole double knit selvage on either side. I think from memory, one stitch, which would be the kind of central purl column, got knit together with its neighbor to make that split. Maybe I'll insert a close-up photo, but you can see that the middle is still a bit stretched, and maybe next time, rather than knitting together that central stitch, I would cast it off, just one stitch. But I think it came out quite well, and it gave a little bit of extra structure to that split. And oh, and then the other thing is that as well as the additional fabric for the bust on the front to stop the front from kind of hiking up, I did pretty aggressive, I guess, decreases down the side to kind of do waist shaping, but I guess also bust shaping, like decrease the stitch count from the like widest part. But okay, now we're getting into the nitpicking, but I don't enjoy how I did that because I think I was lazy. I made a decision, which was to do central double decreases, and then once I saw that it was bad or that I didn't like it, I didn't go back and fix it. I would choose instead to probably have a knit purl knit, like 3 stitches that were in the center of my decreases, and decrease into the knit columns on either side. Oh, and then the final detail that I do like is that at the bottom, I turned my 1x1 ribbing into double knitting and did a tubular cast off, but my double knitting I did for like 5 rows instead of the normal 3, so it's a little bit wider of a hem. And yeah, the tubular cast off is nice and stretchy. Cool, and now we'll get into the nitpicks. So I already mentioned that the yarn required that I use 2mm needles, which was already a bit of a fail, and that it's also not the softest. So I just think in general it's probably not the yarn that I would choose for this type of garment, because it is just a bit rough, and maybe it's also just a more rustic wool than I would want. And I think the strand itself is a bit dense, and tightly spun, which I guess is what you want for socks for the hard wearing element, but I wanted something a bit plusher. So I knit the straps, I knit this much of the straps on the front, and then I picked up at the back, and it's not so bad, honestly, but next time, I think that the main thing is that the selvage looked quite messy with the pickup. So next time maybe I would only pick up 2 stitches and then kind of increase the 3rd one for that double knitting, because it kind of flattens a bit wider than it's meant to be. But honestly, it mostly looks messy because of the next nitpick, which is that 1x1 rib knit flat, it's very untidy, at least for me. And I theorize that it's pretty natural that it's untidy because you knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl in one direction. And if you've ever seen videos about why your ribbing is not neat, to do with how far the yarn has to travel between a knit stitch and a purl stitch. And that's kind of okay in the round. Honestly, it doesn't bother me too much. But when you're doing it flat, you have the transition between a knit stitch and a purl stitch happening on a different side of each stitch. And so, at least for me, I end up with the column of knit stitches being kind of each successive row is pulled in a slightly different direction. And so, you get this effect. They just zigzag across. And that zigzagging is pretty bad. Honestly, this is post-blocking and it blocked out somewhat. So it's already better than it was, and it was pretty bad. Probably the most egregious issue with this garment is that I think proportionally, I have too few stitches across the front of the scoop, so I didn't cast off enough between the straps there, and too many stitches in the side and under the arm. The straps end up looking too close together, or they kind of come in here, and that would be fixed either by the sides under the arm, pulling it a bit more, like having less and having to stretch more and pulling it outwards, or by there being more stitches in the middle and those straps just naturally sitting out without having to be stretched, or a combination. So if I were to knit another one, which I will talk about later in the video, I would just make sure that the proportions between the stitches in the front and the stitches in the side are a little different. To fix it on this garment, I'd love suggestions, honestly. My boyfriend's like, can you just, like sew it together here? And I was like, but then you'll just have all the spare fabric. And I'm not cutting that because that's like cutting a bit of yarn out of every single round. So yeah, if anyone has any ideas. My current best thought is to kind of add like a corset style lace maybe on the side, like laces, and just pull them a bit tight. But I really don't know how that would work. But yeah, I was thinking like a ribbon, basically. But I'm okay with this just being like a slightly wonky prototype, because as I will mention now, I'm probably going to make another one. I think I've got some way of solving most of the issues with this. So yeah, basically I wanted ribbing. I completely forgot to mention the inspiration for making this top, which was last video, but not everyone will have seen that. So basically Emma, who has a video called Thanks, I Made It, or a channel rather, was inspired by a ad that had like a Zara split front tank top crop, and decided to make a dupe. And I was heavily inspired by this. It just looked so cute. And then I also saw her version, and that was also incredibly cute. And so I decided that I would like to make one. But yeah, I think I have a kind of just, commercial tank top that's made of a knit fabric, and it's got ribs. And I just liked the idea. I got inspired by the idea of like a squishy, like a thick squishy knit rib fabric. And so that's kind of why I decided to do 1x1 rib. And I just added the edging details that I liked the look of, and I wanted it to be a scoop neck, with like not too high a neck as well, just for reasons. So yeah, Emma, if you're watching, thank you for the inspiration. This is definitely a fun knit. I wish I had not chosen something that required 2mm needles, because it took me way longer than yours did. But yeah, anyway, I quite like this, but I will probably make another version. And so because I like this squishy rib, I've chosen a yarn that will be more squishy, I think. And then I've swatched for this, and we'll see later. But I think I've come up with a solution to the wonky 1x1 rib while still getting the plush rib, like soft rib look that I want. Okay, that's enough to pique your interest, hopefully, to stick around a bit longer. I'm not sure how much I'll wear it. I'm not sure if I'll reuse the yarn later or not either. I guess I could make socks, but I'm making socks out of the grey yarn I have in this base, and honestly, I don't love it as a sock yarn either, so maybe this will just chalk it up as a learning experience, and I might wear it a bit. It's just, the strap's not sitting right. It kind of bugs me, like it makes it less wearable for sure. I think I also maybe made the straps just like a centimetre too long, but because I knit it top down, it's actually very hard to adjust. What can you do? Okay, so works in progress. The first one, I'll give a bit of context. So I went with my boyfriend. We had a Wednesday off. Don't know why, a public holiday. And so we took Monday, Tuesday off as well, and had a 5-day holiday that we took to Rome and Naples. And it was our first time in either place. So we booked all of the most touristy things, like we went to see the Vatican City and the Sistine Chapel, toured the Colosseum, all this stuff. And so I knew ahead of time that there would be a lot of time spent in queues and on planes and trains and, classic travel stuff. So I wanted travel knitting. But at the time, my one whip was, other than the socks, which are not good. I mean, they're okay travel knitting, but it's just not inspiring enough. So other than that, I had only that tank top on my needles, but that was on 2mm metal needles. and honestly they look a bit dangerous, and I was worried that they'd get confiscated on the flight to Rome. So I was packing for this trip very last minute, and my knitting packing kind of wound up a little bit haphazard. I had bought some drops Belle because I wanted to try it, and I knew I was gonna make like a summer t-shirt or something out of it. So I just packed 4 balls of drops Belle, and I think I just looked at the label, and so I ended up choosing 4mm needles or something to pack with it, which is not on the surface that bad an idea, but it meant I was very constrained in terms of what I could knit, and I didn't have my other size needles and stuff with me. So on the train to the airport, I was looking for patterns, and I found the Mio Mighty by Park Williams, which was pretty close to what I wanted, close to the yardage that I had, like the vibe I kind of wanted, although it is negative ease, and I think I wanted something with a bit of drape, but that's okay. It felt like it would work. But it was, I think the Mio Mighty is like 3.75mm needles. Yeah, so the Mio Mighty is 3.75mm needles, and I had 4. And correctly, I was like, I can make it work. But incorrectly, I didn't knit a gauge swatch. I just thought, I'll cast on and then see my gauge. Gauge swatch, okay, people? Like, or if you're not going to at least, well, okay, I did measure my gauge. That's the issue, is that I did, and then I didn't fully, so it was too big. But it wasn't as big as it was going to be, or, measuring a strip this tall wasn't accurate enough. But then B, I didn't do the maths to work out exactly the percentage difference that even that off measurement would give me. Otherwise, I think I would have started again. Although, maybe if I'd started again at that point with my inaccurate measurement, it would already have been doomed, because then I would have still not adjusted enough. Anyway, the point is, I merrily cast on, and I knit my way through like a ball and a half of drops Belle, because I had a train trip, a plane ride, and then the next day I'm pretty sure we went to the Vatican, and there was just a lot of queuing and I was knitting. And then I finally decided to put the whole thing in, try it on tubing, and it was just like, it was out to here, and it's meant to be like a negative ease t-shirt. I have a picture of the first version versus what I cast back on, so I'll flash that on the screen, taken in the hotel room. So at that point I course corrected, and I calculated the actual number of stitches I'd need for the right circumference, and rather than rip out what I had, I just cast on with new ball of yarn, and that was okay. I could have done a better job, but that knitting still saved my sanity and many queues, and it's nicer to have something to knit on while you're waiting than, I had to queue like 30 minutes every time I wanted to go to the bathroom those days, so, it's just nice to have something that doesn't make you want to scream. And I felt like everyone else in the queue was a bit envious of me as well. They were like, oh man, I wish I had something to do instead of think about how much I need to pee. But yeah, so no regrets really, except it was funny that I managed to get so far without, and then have to start again. And then the second time I started knitting, I also, just because I'd noticed that it was quite a loose fabric, and the Mio Mighty is meant to be at a dense gauge, so I cast on a fewer number of stitches, but I also did just make an effort to knit a bit tighter, and I noticed that there's 2 ways to knit tightly in my mind. One is to kind of really tension the yarn, like keep tugging it after you have knit your stitch. And that one I think is terrible, like it's really hard on my hands, it's just not a good vibe. But the other way to knit quite tightly without any real effort is to just like be right down at the tips and just make teeny movements. Like when you pull the yarn through, just stop, like the moment it's out of the stitch, and like don't pull, like, you know, sometimes you make bigger movements and you're like, ooh yeah, like loosey goosey, we're having fun. But yeah, if you just make teeny tiny movements down at the tips and don't pull your stitches along very often, like let them kind of bunch up. Like I ended up with quite tight stitches sometimes, like not too tight I think, because then you end up with issues just knitting into the stitches, so you have to still keep a balance. Although still, I think it would be hard to knit that tightly with a completely plant-based yarn, which Drops Belle is. But yeah, I found it quite comfortable to actually knit at quite a tight gauge, so that's good. I'll show you what I've got. That was a lot of talking without a lot of demonstrating, but I'm knitting it in this colour, what's it called? I think it's Natural or something. Which is actually quite a cream, like it's quite yellow, almost, I would say almost like a very, very pale apricot. I don't know if it's going to suit me, but what can you do? I ordered this online and I didn't know just how off the off-white would be. And yeah, so this is a fair bit, I guess. It's gonna be cropped for sure. I mean, the pattern's meant to be cropped, but in an absolutely ideal world, I think it would go under my belly button, but just barely. But I think it's gonna be up above it, which is fine. I'll probably still wear it. So this is probably like a couple centimeters below the sleeve split, and I've already added bust shaping with exactly the same method actually that I used on the tank top. So 2 wedges of short rows. And this is now on hold. And the reason for that is that I have lost the rest of the yarn for it, because I left it in Naples in a drawer at the side of my hotel bed, along with, much more importantly, my house key. And I've been in touch with the owner of the accommodation. This was actually like 3 weeks ago now, so I am getting a bit anxious. They asked for my address and they said that they would mail it to me, but I asked for an update last week and I didn't hear anything back. So, you know, I think eventually it's going to work out. It's just a question of how much I'm going to have to poke them. Obviously I'm offering to pay for postage and also even their time, because the system here with house keys is that if it unlocks like common areas, replacing them is like a few $100s. So I'm like, I will pay you like, you know, a fair amount just to avoid that extra cost to me. But yeah, I mean, obviously I could order, it's Drops Belle, it's not super expensive, but I've got other things that I've been knitting, so that's just gonna sit as a UFO until I am reunited with the other 2 balls of yarn. Yeah, do a sweep of the hotel before you leave, folks. I was very dumb to kind of stash things away and then not get them out. Yeah, so that's that one. I'm quite enjoying the pattern. It's quite simple actually, although it does have satin sleeves, which I think will be the most interesting when I get there. I guess the thing about it is that it is a cropped pattern that's bottom up, which makes it a bit hard to gauge just the length that you're getting. But yeah, I guess because I'm pretty flexible about the lengths of things, I don't really mind that. I'm a bit nervous about the shoulders for it, because my shoulders are a bit wider, I think, than like my bust circumference would indicate. And so once I recalculated the gauge for it, so you know, I'm now not really knitting this to pattern at all, so I've got a much smaller stitch count, but I think that I'm going to do the armhole shaping for like size 0, which is basically the least amount of armhole shaping, because then I think what that'll do is it'll leave me with the most stitches across the shoulders out of all the options. So yeah, I might do the medium size neckline shaping, because I don't really like my t-shirts like so high necked. But I think there's also not a huge difference between the different sizes in terms of the neckline. Yeah, okay, so that was definitely an enjoyable knit. It was good travel knitting. 4mm needles is a fun size of needle because you get to make a lot of progress. It was plain stockinette in the round. Yeah, and so far I'm enjoying working with Drops Belle, so I'm excited to have that finished. But not so excited that I'm gonna go out and buy more. Okay, and then my second work in progress, I will show you. So this came up last video that I had some hand-dyed variegated yarn that I'd picked up on holiday in New Zealand. It's by a dyer called Kiwiyarna, and the colorway was called Paddling, and I've got a photo of the skeins that I bought. So I bought 2 400-meter skeins of fingering weight, and it's superwash merino with 20% nylon content, so it's like a sock yarn, which I think is pretty typical, like hand-dyed base. I bought this and then I didn't work with it for ages because I was kind of not sure what to make, and I think luckily maybe for me, I was smart enough to wait and try making something with this before I bought like a whole lot of more hand-dyed, highly variegated yarn, because yeah, it is definitely a tricky one to work out what to do. So I mentioned, I think in the previous video, like my contenders for patterns for this, and I ended up choosing a pattern called the Belle Knot Blouse Light. So it's by a designer called Emilie Schiøtt. I don't know how to pronounce the Danish, Norwegian but she goes by Queernets on Instagram, and it's just, I actually haven't seen like a ton of other patterns like it. To me it looks like very cute and trendy, but also quite like elegant and plain. It's got quite a deep scoop neck, but you can wear that either on the front or the back, so it's completely reversible. And then it also has this option for like ruffled hems either on the sleeve or on the body. And this version is the fingering weight version because there's also a DK version. And so I will say that I'm really glad that I had this yarn sitting around so that I bought this pattern and started it, because the pattern I am really enjoying. But I think my doubts with the hand-dyed, highly variegated are definitely a little bit well-founded, because, okay, I'll show you, but basically the fabric I'm getting, you kind of end up, you know, with highly variegated, you end up with like striped looking, you know, fabric. And then on top of that, this color, which in the skein I was like, oh, you know, it's so kind of natural looking, but like when you do it like this, it looks quite graphic. And also to me, with the color, it kind of gives like camo, but maybe like video game pixelated camo. I don't know. I don't know how much I love it. It's okay. So I've been doing helical knitting from the joining in the round under the sleeves, or maybe just from when I joined in the round at the bottom of the scoop neck. Because I was worried about kind of getting that zebra pooling that you can get with hand-dyed. So yeah, I've been doing helical knitting. It was my first time, and it's lovely how easy it is. And I'm already a little bit inspired to do, like, you can do helical knitting with like more than 2 colors. So I'm already a bit inspired to try like a 3-color, or maybe a 3-strand, but like 1 of one color and 2 of the same. Anyway, helical knitting is fun. And I don't think the pooling's too bad. Like, you can definitely see, you know, like there's this dark kind of patch, but it's not enough. And to me, it's kind of well spread out enough that it doesn't really bother me. So I'm halfway at the moment through applying double knitting to the neckline. So we've got it on the shallower side because it's reversible. And I haven't done it on the big scoop yet. And the reason I'm doing that is because I cast off the body, but it's too short, because I did that again while I was kind of away, out and about. And also I'm just lazy, because like my needles are never long enough that I can try something on the needles. So I always have to transition either to try it on tubing, or sometimes I'll just knit half the stitches onto a second pair of needles so that I've got like 2 cables. And I had tried this on, I think like 4 centimeters ago, and then I'd been like, oh yeah, maybe another few centimeters, and then I don't know, but then I tried it on again and it's like this far above my belly button, which I think I would rather, since it's going to be a long sleeve top, I would rather it be a little bit longer so that it doesn't just leave me cold in my midriff. Yeah, but I really do recommend the pattern. I'll try it on and I'll show you how it looks. Okay, so here we are. So this is here we are. So this side of the neckline doesn't have double knitting yet, so it'll probably be pulled in a bit. Trying it on now with half the neckline done. I'm a bit concerned that as it like loses a bit of stretch around there, it's going to pull the shoulders in too much and they won't be wide enough. So we're gonna have to see how that works out. Maybe once it's been blocked, it'll kind of, I can stretch that double knitting to the extreme. And then yeah, I guess my other gripe at the moment is that it's meant to be negative ease in the sleeves, but this is quite tight around my arm at the moment. So it might end up fairly uncomfortable, yeah, in the shoulders and kind of armpit area. So we're gonna have to see, but like I think that the shape of it is so cute, and even if this ends up being again like a test version and I go up a size across the shoulders in the future, I don't know. I guess I would have to modify the raglan increases to have more stitches in the sleeves and the same amount in the body, but I could do something. The yarn, the way that it looks like, I don't not like it, it's just definitely not what I envisioned looking at the skeins of yarn. But I will be better now at guessing what something will knit up like. I do kind of wish, one thought I had recently was actually looking at Venetia's Friday tee in the Woolly Worker knitting videos. I kind of thought, oh, maybe I should have striped it with a plain colour. That might have been quite a cute look. And the other major contender for the pattern for this yarn was the Ripple Crop Tee or something by Jessie Maid, which is I think 3x3 ribbing, and I think the ribbing might also have helped, I don't know, just kind of like add a bit of dimension to the fabric so that it's not just stripes. I don't know, but you know, despite not being what I intended, I still think it's quite a cool effect actually. It's like, it's okay, and the more fabric I have, the more it also kind of stops looking quite like stripes, and you kind of get a bit like, if you stand back and squint your eyes a little, it gets a bit more like softer and kind of blurred together. So yeah, I think it's okay. And I also tried it on reversed, and having the scoop at the back is also super cute. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased about the pattern. I think, yeah, maybe my sizing is wrong. I did measure my gauge and it is a bit tighter than the pattern recommends. So that might also be my issue with fit. But yeah, again, I think my shoulders are just a bit wide. Yeah, we'll see how it is once I've added all the neckline. Maybe I'll have to pick up more stitches or do the double knitting with a bigger needle, which would be a pain because it is quite a lot of knitting to apply that, but maybe if that will save the garment, it'll be worth it. So now time for the final work in progress, excluding some socks that I'm working on but that I don't have with me and that aren't that interesting yet until I finish one. But yeah, the final thing I'm working on isn't really a work in progress yet, but is the aforementioned second version of that split front crop. And at the moment I have gotten to swatching. So for this I have some yarn I picked up, which is, so actually this one, Fibre Company Luma, I think that this is analogous almost. Yeah, so I think this is very similar makeup to this one, but it's a fingering weight yarn, or actually it's called heavy lace on the thing, and Ravelry says light fingering. But it is the Fibre Company Meadow. So it's this one here. This is a bit wonky because it's like half a skein that I've already wound up some of the ball. And it's, I don't know, I really like this colour. It's kind of like a storm cloud, purpley grey. It's called Heather. And it's actually very similar to the colour I got from holding together Drops Kid Silk in Heather and in grey for a ranunculus that I knit for my mum. So I'll put in a quick picture of that. But yeah, very similar colour, and I think it'll look pretty nice. And I bought it thinking light fingering, you know, that's probably fine. I had already started or nearly finished my other version, and I was like, well, that was clearly not a very thick fingering yarn. But then when I started winding it up, I was like, oh, this is actually really thin. It's 2-ply. But then once I started knitting with it, I realized that the 2-ply, I don't know, it's like it can be thin when it's stretched, but then when it's knit with, it kind of bumps, I don't know how to describe it, but they kind of puff out, and it actually looks quite plump and nice. So I am not worried, and I have been swatching with a 2.7mm needle, and then I just swatched also with a 3mm. And the 3mm is a bit greedy, maybe, but I only have one skein, which is I think 500 meters, so it should probably be enough. But yeah, I figure with a bigger needle it'll go even further. I'll show you. So the bottom section was the 2.7mm and the top is the 3. And honestly, I don't see a huge difference. So I think I would just go with 3. I am very pleased with this because I am basically a genius. So I complained about knitting 1x1 rib flat and how you end up with really wonky stitches and it doesn't block out. And I explained why I thought that was. And I had the flash of insight at some point when I was, I don't know, lying in bed going to sleep or something, that if the issue is alternating between knits and purls in both directions of knitting, then maybe you could only have that alternation happening on one side of the fabric, so in one direction. So this swatch is actually like, I guess, a slip stitch rib. So the knit columns that you see on this side of the fabric are actually only knit on the right side of the fabric, and on the wrong side they're just slipped purlwise with the yarn in front. So you can see that the reverse side of the fabric is pretty untidy looking, a lot kind of more dense. You can't really see what you're looking at. But the other side, yeah, it's like you get these really beautifully defined purl columns, and it's all plump and squishy, and it's exactly what I dreamed. So I wasn't convinced I was going to make another version of this top, but then I swatched with this and now I am, because I believe I can solve the fit issues with where the straps sit, and now I believe that I can have a fabric that I actually really love. And yeah, so this yarn, I didn't mention its makeup. I said it's similar to this, but it's not the same. So it's 40% wool, which is merino, but it's 25% llama. So it's actually 65% plant fiber. And llama sounds like it, so that's kind of quite a lot warmer, I guess. But it is still 20% silk and 15% cellulose from linen. So I guess, yeah, it should still hopefully be breathable and not too hot. But I guess as well, I'm really relying on just breathability through lack of fabric, basically. But it is a lot softer to the touch, and like it does create a much squishier fabric. And so I'm hoping it'll have that kind of soft, squishy, like hugging effect that I'm looking for, of just kind of like really comfortable, because it's just like a soft, like almost like when you just wear pajamas, but like in the day. That's what I want this top to feel like. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I had the vague idea that I might also swatch with 2x2 rib, just to see if that's any tidier in knit flat. I'll probably still do it, but honestly, I don't think it will be. I think this is the one, this is the play. So yeah, all those nitpicking issues that I mentioned with the other top, I will try fixing. I'm sure I will come up with new problems. And because I'm doing on much bigger needles, my gauge, and a completely different stitch pattern, well, somewhat different stitch pattern, this will have a different gauge, and I can probably still mess up the proportions by just doing bad maths with this new gauge. We'll see. I am going to wash my swatch, like block it, so, you know, I'm trying to do everything right. We'll see how it works out. Yeah, so this is exciting and probably what I will work on the most, although I do want to finish my blouse thing. Yeah, that pattern, I really am already considering my next versions. Like in the pattern photos, there's a short sleeve version, and it really is just quite a pretty like negative ease t-shirt style top. Like it's very pretty. And so I think if I got yarn that I could, yeah, the hardest thing is finding yarn that you can tolerate right next to skin. That's one thing, is that jumpers are nice because you have a layer in between you and it, and yeah, summer tanks, it's like summer fibers, but if you want negative ease, you probably don't want to be using cotton or something, so it's a little bit trickier. The final section, I sometimes just talk about what caught my eye, what, you know, makes me excited. Yeah, so there are two things I want to mention here. One is the Irene Lynn pattern called the Millie cardigan, which is a lace cardigan, and it's kind of got these scalloped edges. It just looks really lovely. It looks raglan, I think. And the picture that she posted has kind of elbow length sleeves. I think I would probably make long sleeves. And I have this vision of having kind of like a nut brown cardigan for kind of autumn to wander around misty forests in. I don't know, I mean, this is very specific, but I am looking for a kind of a lace cardigan pattern to knit in a brown yarn. And I don't know, I mean, brown cardigan just doesn't sound romantic, but hopefully it would look as nice as I'm picturing. And so yeah, this pattern's definitely a contender for me. And then the other thing that caught my eye, I'm sure that everyone who's been in the knitting world longer than me will have seen this pattern because it's by Stephen West, but it's called the Penguono. I don't know why it's called that. Maybe something to do with penguin, but there's a Instagram account called Minimalist Machinist, and her name's Rachel, and she does mostly like lots of things about sewing, but she also knits, and she knit a version of this that I think is so beautiful. It's like she's just picked the best colors that go together, and I don't know, it just looks like such a cool kind of jacket style, but it's quite toned down compared to the original pattern photos from Stephen West, which, I mean, I know like that's kind of the shtick almost with him, is that he'll put out a shawl pattern with like neons or whatever, and then someone will knit it in the most beautiful kind of neutral shades, and you'll be like, whoa, how did they see that potential? Or, you know, like it's just completely different vibes. But this one, yeah, I think she just used kind of monochrome in a lot of places where there could be color changes, but then the places where she did add color, I think look just so beautiful. I'll obviously be putting pictures up. So that really caught my eye. And I think she also made a modification where she made the kind of lapel quite a lot shorter, so it just sits like a normal kind of jacket style instead of having a collar. Yeah, anyway, really love that, and it's definitely now on my radar. Oh, I've just scrolling one down, I found one more thing which inspired me, which is by Kathrin, and it's this kind of cute wrap top with ties on both sides. And I saw in the pattern photos that it's either you can have it a bit longer and it can kind of be, because it ties, it looks kind of peplum style, or you can just crop it at the ties. And I would probably knit it cropped at the ties, and it also looks very cute. I don't know if I'll get around to that one this summer, because when it comes to summer knits, I think I still have space in my wardrobe for a few more camisole type things, so I might knit some of the classics. You know, like my favorite things, knitwear, camisoles, etc. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I might not actually end up with that much time, because yeah, summer knits almost is always lighter yarn, which means quite a lot of knitting even for small garments. Yeah, so that's probably the last of my inspiration. I think the only other knitting related things I can tell you about is that for the Belle knot that I had knit, obviously that came in skeined yarn because it was hand dyed, and I don't have a winder and swift, but even if I did, I was knitting it kind of on a trip that I took to France recently to go outdoor bouldering, and I had skeined up one of them but wanted to do the other so that I could do my helical knitting. And the first one I did, so there's a tutorial that shows you how to just hand wind around your thumb, which I find is a good method, and I can link it below. So I'd done that, but with the skein kind of laid out on the carpet just in my living room. And then I was out in the forest and I wanted to wind up my second skein. And I just decided to put it around my neck. And honestly, so I'll put in a little video I have of me winding yarn in the woods, which feels, I don't know, like something. But it's actually quite a good method, honestly, because if you can get it so that the other end of the yarn, the one that you're not winding, is sitting like coming downwards and you can see it and you know where it is. And then as long as you get it so that the bit that you're pulling from is kind of turned outwards from your body, it's actually quite easy to unwind around your head. I mean, your arm gets tired, but you only have to you kind of unwind 3 big loops and then you just spend some time winding that into the ball. And yeah, honestly, and then it started raining, so I had to re-skein the rest that I hadn't wound, and that worked fine as well, and I was able to finish it in the car. So in terms of like not getting tangled, I think it's actually quite a good method, having your head in the middle of the entire arrangement. Yeah, so new recommended hand winding method, especially if you don't have any floor space. I don't know how people tend to wind their skeins. Maybe this is like common knowledge, but yeah, if you've felt like you can't take a skein of yarn traveling with you or whatever, reconsider, because as long as you have the time and the commitment, which I know many of us do have to our knitting, I think it can work out fine. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, because I think that was probably quite a long ramble about everything. I've got a few things that I'm excited to finish up, and I kind of, have some plans bubbling away that might be fun as well in the future. Let me know if you have any thoughts about literally anything. I always love hearing from you. I have had my day completely made by some very sweet comments from you guys. So yeah, please don't hesitate to comment, even if it's just on like one single point. You're just like, I need to correct you about this. Go ahead, be my guest. And then I'm always going to appreciate if you can give this video a like, share it, subscribe, hit the bell, all the things that YouTube takes as a signal that this is enjoyed. Thank you so much for hanging out. It's always lovely to have your company, and I'll be here again sometime in the future once I've got more to show.